Welcome to Core Conversations, a podcast from the United States Coast Guard Academy Alumni Association. I'm First Class Aislinn Murray, coming to you from Studio 1887 here in the Alumni Center.
And I'm First Class Elijah Parent. Today, we're excited to bring you a conversation with Colleen Denny, a member of class of 2009, whose journey from the Academy to Coast Guard service and into the nonprofit and humanitarian space really captures what it means to lead with purpose.
In this episode, you'll hear how Colleen's early experiences as a cadet from leadership roles and community engagement helped shape a career centered on service, adaptability, and impact.
We also dive into her work beyond the Coast Guard, including humanitarian missions and global partnerships, and the leadership lessons she's carried with her, especially when it comes to operating in high-pressure environments and staying grounded through it all.
Before we get into the conversation, we want to take a minute to reflect on what stood out to us and how it connects to cadet life today. Elijah, what was one moment or insight from Colleen's story that really stuck with you?
I think the thing that stuck with me the most was one of the leadership habits she learned in her time in the Coast Guard. And she talked about making your bed in the morning because it's one of the first things you decide to do that day. And you're either going to tackle it and take it on, or you're just going to forget about it. And then that's going to choose your path for the rest of the day. And I think that relates to here at the Academy because, we have to make our racks every day. And then if you leave your room seeing a nice, clean, crisp rack, you're just going to feel better and you're just going to feel accomplished and it's just going to set you up for the rest of the day. So,
definitely. I love that, Lige.
What about you? What's something from her journey that made you think differently about your own path, especially as you're getting closer to heading out into the fleet?
As our audience will hear in the podcast, I thought it was so cool when Colleen was telling us about her experiences in Ukraine and on the front lines and talking about her work in Spirit of America. She talked a lot about the Coast Guard and that transition into the private sector, but I think it was really cool hearing how dangerous of situations she put herself in to serve for something greater than herself. And I am so excited for everyone else to hear her story and how powerful and inspiring it is.
I totally agree.
From operations at sea to humanitarian work around the world, this episode is truly a reminder that there's no single path after the Academy, just a shared foundation of selfless service. So, without further ado, Elijah, let's get into it. This is First Class Aislinn Murray, and you're listening to Core Conversations, a podcast of the USCGA Alumni Association. I'm here in the Alumni Center's Studio 1887 with my co-host, Sarah King-Clark. And we're excited to welcome this episode's alumni guest, Ms. Colleen Denny, class of 2009. Welcome, Colleen.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yay! So, Colleen, give us your 60-second career arc from 9/11 to today.
Sure. So again, thank you for having me today. It's so good to be back at the Academy. I was a freshman in high school when 9/11 happened. So, of course, it was incredibly impactful to the entire country and to me individually. And that's when I was a freshman, I decided that I wanted to start looking at something a bit different than just the traditional college career. So I was lucky enough to be admitted into the great class of 2009 at the Coast Guard Academy. I served active duty for just over 8 years. 6 of those were on ships, so 3 different ships. So I was a permanent cutterman, including being the XO, executive officer of a patrol boat, and the commanding officer of a fast response cutter. And after departing the Coast Guard, I went to grad school, earned my master's degree in international public policy, and then afterwards joined the nonprofit and private sector world and started working for an organization called Spirit of America. And I've been there ever since. So for the last 7 years, I've been in the nonprofit space doing international development and humanitarian assistance, disaster response work.
That is awesome. We are so excited to have you here.
I know. I can't wait to do it. Happy to be here.
So, like you said, 9/11 was a huge impact for your generation. Why did you choose the Coast Guard instead of those other DoD branches?
Yeah, quite honestly, I didn't know anything about the Coast Guard before 9/11. I didn't know there was a Coast Guard Academy. I knew of West Point or of the Naval Academy. But as I started to figure out, what service looks like and what service meant to me, I learned more about all the academies, including this Coast Guard Academy. And I was really attracted to the idea of it being in Department of Homeland Security and not Department of Defense. I really liked how the missions were so widespread from, aids to navigation, to fisheries, to humanitarian assistance, and disaster response. So I really liked the idea that it was a service that was military, but also was more focused on saving lives and not taking lives. And that was just really lined up with my personal ethos and what I thought service, like how I could best serve this country and give a little back to this country that has given so many opportunities to my family, to me, and everything. When I was a senior, as a junior, I went to AIM, the Academy Introductory Mission. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Coast Guard Academy was my number one choice. And I was lucky enough, after a basketball game my senior year of high school, my mom said, the Coast Guard Academy mailed you something. Opened up the letter, and sure enough, was lucky enough to get in. So I reported in June of 2005.
Wow.
So did that humanitarian instinct show up early for you at the academy?
Yeah, I think so. Both my third class summer and first class summer, I spent on ships, on 270-foot medium endurance cutters. And both of them were doing humanitarian assistance, migrant safety operations. And I really saw that there was this need, this dramatic need for safety at sea, and that people are in the most desperate situations and will take to the sea to try to improve their lives, their circumstances, their situations. And that was so overwhelming to see at first. We grow up with such immense privilege here in the United States. And, it was really shocking to see the conditions and the lengths that people go to try to have an opportunity. And so I thought the humanitarian aspect of Coast Guard missions was really powerful. It respects human dignity. It respects human life. It respects human security. And that was really inspiring. And so I continued to, as my career progressed in the Coast Guard, I tried to stay aligned with those same missions.
That is so great. I think that humanitarian drive and that instinct is really strong here, especially within my generation. And it's really cool to hear that you had that instinct while you were a cadet here, and you've carried it forward through the Coast Guard and even beyond in the private sector. And I think that's so awesome.
I know you had some time, you did some Boys and Girls Club outreach.
Yeah, it was over the weekends. We would do basketball clinics at one of the elementary schools here. Really fun to just be in the community and showing them, that we were normal human beings as well. I think, the Coast Guard Academy can be so, separate from the New London community. Sometimes that's really good to have that interaction. And then also, here at the Academy, I was a company commander for the summer semester. So my first summer, I was the golf company commander, Go Golf Company, and really enjoyed that. I got to work really closely with my company officer and company chief, and then, of course, with the second class who were training the swabs. It was just really fun. Every day was so hard and so long and so tough here, but looking back, I just have so many positive memories that, you don't remember the hard compared to all the friendships and getting through really difficult situations with each other and growing so much. It was really great experience.
That's awesome. As it relates to the community service you did while you were a cadet, we still have community service opportunities. It's actually grown expansively. So there's a bunch of opportunities on base now. And we are able to go to as far as Rhode Island. People have done beach cleanups. I am a coach at the local elementary school for Girls on the Run.
I've been an assistant coach for Girls on the Run.
I love it. It's awesome. I did it when I was a little girl. So it's been really cool to give back to the community and to see, New London has obviously done a lot for us as cadets. I mean, it hosts us on Liberty, but it is really cool to see that there's an entire world outside of these gates and they are living a very different life than many of us. And it's cool to show them that they too can do this and they too can work hard. And they can be whoever and whatever they want to be. So that's really cool. I'm glad that the Academy has set that up for us.
Yeah, that sounds like it's really expanded. That's really great.
Definitely. Yeah, it's awesome. And then also, you talked about being a company commander. That is amazing. So do you think that there was any leadership lessons that you learned from being a company commander that you took with you throughout your leadership in the Coast Guard?
Yeah, we probably didn't have the dictionary for it at the time, but being able to, recognize when someone, whether it's a cadre or a swab, but recognizing when that's enough and it's time to take a minute and figure out if things are okay and if they're being pushed, in a positive way or maybe not such a great way. So I think that was something that was really interesting as a company commander, helping guide the cadre, but then also keeping an eye on the swabs as well. I wasn't a cadre, right? So that wasn't, my immediate role, but just seeing the way that the second class kind of learned how to become cadre and the responsibility that it came with. It's a pretty big deal, right? Training the incoming class. I think it was taken really seriously, which is really great because there is, a legacy that the academy has to keep. And a lot of that is on the cadets themselves. That is on the Corps. And I think that was really instilled in me. And that's why I wanted to be a company commander the next summer, because I thought it was so formative and such a unique opportunity to really impact that class. And when I was here, there was big rivalry between even years and odd years. Does that still exist?
Kind of. It's funny when a lot of alumni come back, or a lot of the teachers who are rotating military faculty, they will make those jokes. And so it's kind of coming back because of them. But I don't think it's as strong as it used to be.
Odd years. Odd years are where it's at.
Even. That's hilarious.
So that was, I was class of 2009, training the class of 2011. And, we had to make sure that they were better than the even years that sandwiched them.
Right.
That's so funny.
It was something we took, seriously, but also it just made it competitive and fun as well.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
So are you ready to shift into your Coast Guard operational career?
Sure.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So what does a migrant interdiction actually look like from the deck plates?
So I had a lot of experience with this. I was stationed on a 270 out of Portsmouth, Virginia. So that was always doing Caribbean patrols. And then I was the XO of a 110-foot patrol boat in Key West. And that was nonstop, human safety, life at sea.
And this would be 2009, 2000?
Yeah. So
what's the time frame
2009 was on the medium endurance cutter, and then 2011 was when I became the XO of the patrol boat. And then again in Puerto Rico in 2015. Primary mission was safety of life at sea and human safety on the water. So what it looks like is usually you would receive intel from ashore saying that a migrant boat was spotted, maybe by a plane, maybe by aircraft, or maybe the Cuban Coast Guard radioed it in and let the U.S. know that they had seen a migrant chug departing. And they were called chugs, or boat is a generous term for what these actually look like. They're pieced together. It's wood, it's scrap metal, it's styrofoam. It's really anything that can try to make something somewhat floatable and somewhat, watertight. So we would receive the alert, and then you head to the last known position. And because these are small, handmade boats, they don't have a radar signature usually, and they have a really low profile, so they're really hard to actually find because you can't see them on radar, and you just have to spot them visually for 9 times out of 10. So if and when you finally did find them, I was a boarding officer, so I would be in the small boat, and we would launch to go talk to them and figure out if there's any immediate medical emergencies. Oftentimes they're dehydrated, they're hungry, they're seasick. Depending on what the sea and weather state is, they can be completely frightened, just trying to jump on our boat and get off theirs. Oftentimes it's half submerged. So just really desperate situations. So you bring them on board the small boat and then onto the ship, and you frisk them. You make sure that they don't have any dangerous weapons, anything dangerous for themselves or for you and your crew. And then washing and hygiene and food is given to them. Oftentimes there's pregnant women, or there are young children or elderly folks. So you triage most extreme cases to those that seem to be, in the best conditions. And then from there, depending on where they're coming from and, what their situation is, what they were leaving, what they were fleeing, then there is also a protocol for the U.S. State Department would oftentimes then come on board and interview them and see if they had a legitimate claim for asylum. If they were fleeing, if it was determined that them returning back to their home state would be dangerous for them, then different conditions were set for them, and they would be moved, via the State Department. Often took a long time, right? Sometimes these chugs, they're 15 feet long and would have 40 people packed into them. So really dangerous, even offloading them one at a time into the small boat and then getting them onto the cutter would be really challenging. Sometimes they, didn't want to comply and would fight and swing their oars at you or, outrun you. But oftentimes it was huge relief to see the Coast Guard and to be put onto a safe and stable platform and then figuring out what's next.
Right. Wow. How did you lead a crew through those complex missions? I mean, like you said, that just seems so draining. It seems like a lot. You talked about, pregnant women, desperate families, but also we're wearing the uniform and we're doing the mission. So how did you do that?
Yeah, it's challenging, right? It was certainly difficult, as an individual, but like you said, we're in uniform and we're carrying out a mission. I always saw it and always framed it as this is a safety of life at sea issue. And what other choice do we have but to bring them onto the cutter and to feed them and, give them water and help get them back into a stable state. It was certainly challenging. There would be oftentimes they're leaving really desperate situations and all they want is a better life. And, it of course makes you then internally reflect and say oh my gosh, how lucky am I that I grew up in such, a stable, democratic, free country and, never wanted for anything, truly. Not that I grew up in a luxurious castle or anything, but never, had a very stable, normal day-to-day life. So it really makes you internally reflect and reassess the conditions that you came from and then those that are just hoping for a chance at that. We definitely had times, especially when the migrants would be on board for days at a time, you get to know them. You get to know that this woman is diabetic and needs insulin, or that this man worked for 40 years as a geologist. And so you would keep it professional, but you acknowledge these are human beings. They have the right to a dignified treatment and a dignified life. And make sure that you and your crew are providing that and doing the best you could to ensure their safety.
Wow.
It makes me think, I would imagine that after all those days, what happens next? Next step is you bring them back. If they don't get the asylum, they get sent back to their home country, I would imagine. And then what does that sort of debrief look like for the team? Are you having conversations with your crew, or is everyone just okay, back to business as usual? Or what does that look like from a mental health standpoint?
Yeah, I wish it had probably looked different. Now today, I feel and I bet it does look different on cutters. At the time, the op tempo was so intense. I mean, every single day, every single night, you are finding these chugs or finding these rafts. And so you are repatriating folks almost daily back to their home country after the process has been completed and their screening has been completed. And then we would depart Cuba and head to the next chug, head to the last known position of the next one. So in a sense, the busy op tempo almost kept you occupied and kept the crew really busy, and you felt like you were doing a lot, right? You are finding these folks in really desperate situations, and you're constantly responding to that call, which is satisfying from a mission execution standpoint, but from a just human mental health standpoint, definitely challenging, definitely exhausting, definitely almost daily on your circumstances versus others. And, I imagine today there's probably a lot more conversations about that, which is a really good thing. Not that I served super long ago, but, I don't think the term mental health was a term that I knew or that was used when I was, serving in uniform.
Right.
Certainly not like it is today, which I'm so glad it is, such a bigger part of the conversation and acknowledged.
Definitely. I think I also want to address, you spoke about being the XO in Key West, and also, were you the only female when you were the XO as well? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's what I thought. So can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, I remember from our previous conversation, you told a story about needing a hair tie, and that really stuck with me. So could you tell our audience about that? Sure. Being the only female on that ship, and what did that feel like day to day?
Yeah, so at the time, Key West had 4 110-foot patrol boats and 1 87-foot patrol boat. So a big presence. And I was the only female out of all 5 of those crews. And so on my ship, the P Island, crew of 18, I'm the number 2 on board as the executive officer and the only female. So when you're underway, you're already very isolated. You already feel like you're an island. And then by being the only female, it was this like double layer of isolation that I felt. And I had a great crew. I had a great captain. But the story you're referencing is one time after doing a migrant interdiction, I come back on the boat and I'm putting my hair back up in the bun and my hair tie snapped. And like I was looking through my stateroom and going through all my stuff and I couldn't find another hair tie. And I remember I just like kind of looked around for a second and was, I am so alone out here. I don't even have someone to say like, hey, can I borrow your hair tie? Mm-hmm. And it's so trivial. It's a silly story. I had to use shot string to tie my hair up. But it was really this moment that just laid bare how alone I was in that sense. And, I chose to remain underway for a couple of reasons. 1, I love the mission. 2, I found it really challenging, and I kind of always try to have a chip on my shoulder to try to like take on challenges. And then 3, because there weren't a lot of females underway. I'm sure the numbers have gone up and the percentages have gone up, but there weren't many people who looked like me that had chosen underway careers. And so I wanted add one more to the pot and set the standard for maybe some other new females who were entering the service and were looking at doing the underway route. But yeah, after that, I would always pack like an extra 10 hair ties.
Stock the hair ties.
That's awesome. We're celebrating the 50 years of women at the Academy, and the Alumni Association is hard at work planning a bunch of stuff. And I have been fortunate enough to help with some of the planning with Captain Marcial, a breakout group. And we were talking with one of the other alumni women who are helping plan, and they were asking us to come up with stories about being, female or times that you felt like you were paving the way for others. And I kept thinking of that story. I was like, that is a perfect example of, you didn't let it stop you. You found a solution. And I think it's really cool. And it puts it into perspective of you were hard at work and you really paved the way for people like me and all of us other women who are here at the Academy. So thank you for sharing that. I think it's awesome. It might be a small story to you, but it really stuck with me.
Yeah, and it's so cool that the Alumni Association and the Academy is doing so much to celebrate the 50 years. It's like heartbreaking, but also encouraging that there's still so many firsts happening for females in the Coast Guard and in service more broadly. You think in this day and age, like how are firsts still being achieved? And they are, which, it is a two-sided coin of celebrating those accomplishments, but also thinking like, gosh, it took a long time to get here.
Definitely.
There's so many women that paved the way ahead and male allies too.
Definitely. So tell us about your time as an Admiral's Aide and how did serving as an Admiral's Aide change your understanding of decision making?
Yeah. So I made lieutenant and then immediately became the Admiral's Aide. So I was, fresh 03. So I served as the Pacific Area Admiral's Aide, so the 3-star admiral that is in Alameda, California. It was my favorite job in the Coast Guard. I loved it. I was a new lieutenant, and I worked for 2 different admirals. So Admiral Paul Zukunft for 1 year, and then he was named commandant. And then I worked for Admiral Charlie Ray, who became the next Pacific Area commander. And both were incredible bosses. They're both very different leadership styles, just different personalities. So I feel like I got this wide exposure to leadership and seeing, that admirals can take like many forms and shapes and different leadership approaches too. It was, again, as a young lieutenant, I was in the room and privy to all these conversations that opened up, like the exposure was enormous, and it was so humbling to be a part of those. And I'm sitting in the back taking notes, right, and keeping an eye on the clock for the admiral. But still, to be privy to these conversations and exposed to, political leaders and local community leaders and traveling internationally representing the Coast Guard, it was really awesome. You know, there was a time where sexual assault prevention and response, it was an inflection point when I was an Admiral's aide. And I remember Admiral Zukunft was meeting with a senator from Alaska, Senator Lisa Murkowski, and they're talking about it. And then she turned to me and she said, well, we've got a young female officer in here. Like, what do you think about this? So just incredible exposure to these high-level policy and decision-making points that impacted the whole fleet. And I thought that was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Both Admiral Ray and Admiral Z were really great bosses. They cared for, obviously, the service, but the people that worked with and for them. I'm still in touch with Admiral Ray and his wife, Miss Donna. They're just like such wonderful people and mentors. And I really also enjoyed like carrying the football around and going from meeting to meeting with the Admiral and hearing the way that he thought and processed and was aware of, you know, that if he asked a question, what he thought might be a simple question, it could lead to 15 people scurrying and working all night and trying to answer it. You know, so always being really aware of like what they were asking and what they were expecting of their people. I love
that. Is so cool. What would you say to any listeners who are interested in becoming an Admiral's aide? What was the process like for you?
Yeah, I'd say first find someone who's been one before because they can give you, you know, the inside baseball. And the process, it was fun. It was like the first time I ever interviewed for a job was when I was interviewing to become an Admiral's aide. So it's a special assignment. So you're working with the special assignment detailer. And you have to submit. At the time, my process had to first be interviewed by like their chief of staff or their executive assistant. You had to submit a writing sample, had to submit photos of you in uniform to make sure that, you know, you look pretty sharp if you're standing next to the Admiral. And of course, they're looking at your career and your bio and what you want to do next. And then if you make it through that first round, then you do a phone interview or video call with the Admiral. And, you know, they're asking you questions. I remember the questions. Where do you get your news from? What do you do in your free time? How do you handle, you know, stressful situations? Giving a couple circumstance questions that you have to answer. It was pretty intense at the time. I remember going through thinking,
as a new
like,
lieutenant.
Yeah. I'm like, I think I want this job, right? But I would say the most helpful thing was talking to other folks who had served as aides and really getting their take on it and you know, understanding who the principal is, who the Admiral is that you're working for, and making sure that your personality match too, because you work with them every single day. You know, it's 7 days a week. You're traveling with them all the time. You're supporting them. So you can never be 5 steps ahead of an Admiral, but you're trying to be and trying to anticipate what they need next and how to coordinate making that happen. It was, so I joked that was the first time I interviewed for a job. I was like 27 and had never interviewed for a job before.
That's awesome. So I guess the next time you had to was when you transitioned out of the Coast Guard?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's talk about that a little bit. So you briefly mentioned that you went to grad school after, so you used the GI Bill for that to get international public policy and conflict management. So when did you realize that you preferred direct on-the-ground impact over traditional government pathways? Because you really could have gone multiple different directions with your degree.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I studied at Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies for my master's, which is in D.C. So when you're studying, you know, international affairs, international policy, D.C. is the place to be. And so in grad school, I had a fellowship in between my summer and fall semesters where I went and lived in Kenya and worked with a Kenyan nonprofit that was working in northern Kenya in the northern Rift Valley, preventing conflict between warring tribes. And these are pastoralist tribes, so they move with their herds. And because of climate change and extreme environmental conditions, their herds are moving to where there's water, where there's grass, where they can eat. And so this is infringing upon traditional tribal lands that belong to other tribes. And it was causing conflict and war and cattle raids. And the nonprofit that I was working for was working with the children of those two tribes, because the traditional model was like you have the male elders of the two tribes talk to each other and try to figure it out. And that wasn't working. It doesn't work. You need to involve the whole community. And so starting with the children, and then that brings the schools in, that brings the families in, you know, impacts the entire tribe, not just those that are at the top. So working for this nonprofit, Children Peace Initiative Kenya, I was on the ground. We're living in northern Kenya, like in the bush, no electricity, no water, mud huts, and I loved it. You can see the impacts, and you're working with these children, and I just saw how working directly with those communities and how the nonprofit had a local solution to a local problem. It wasn't an idea that was cooked up in DC and then exported 5,000 miles away. It was those who were closest to the problem set, who understood it best and knew how to fix it. And so because of that fellowship in Kenya, I realized that this was what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay in the nonprofit space. I wanted to work with local communities, and I wanted to bring local solutions to those local problems. And beforehand, I was toying around with the idea of maybe I'll join State Department, maybe I'll work for USAID, the Food for Peace program, something like that. I knew I wanted to stay in the humanitarian space, but after that fellowship, I knew that the nonprofit and private sector world was where I thought I could have most impact and, take my Coast Guard experience, take my grad school education and really apply it.
Wow.
What was your specific role? So you said it was like a local nonprofit that had come up with the idea, but what was the fellowship? What were you doing with the nonprofit?
Yeah, so I was embedded with them essentially to provide some professional expertise to help scale the nonprofit, to help, I don't want this to sound like demeaning to their operations, but as an outside perspective to really try to grow it and scale it and professionalize it. So they were the practitioners of the conflict mediation and everything, but I was also helping fundraise. Helped them apply for grants internationally, helped build their media and marketing presence, and really just tried to do everything to support them being able to be in the field more, to hire more people, to have more funding, to be able to travel and support these tribes. And then also, of course, I was learning so much from them. In no way was I the expert, but between my experiences and their experience and their local thought leadership, it was just a really good combination.
I think that's a great example of understanding, where the locals in the community understand their community best, and you're just there to provide that support and learning. I love that. Moving into your work with Spirit of America, what lessons did you take from this fellowship in Kenya into this new role that you had?
Yeah. When I returned from Kenya and was in my last semester at grad school, I knew, okay, I'm going to the nonprofit space. I want to work in private sector. Government service is wonderful and righteous and important. But for me, I knew I wanted to have some of the freedom and flexibility that you can't have when you're working in a bureaucratic government system, but you can have it in the private sector world. So I found Spirit of America as I was finishing my last semester at grad school and convinced them to hire me, and have been there ever since in January of 2019.
Wow. That is awesome. I think that's so cool. Again, that humanitarian mission theme, it's so cool that it's been so prevalent throughout literally since 9/11 until now. So why can a nonprofit move faster than the U.S. government? You talked a little bit about in general, the nonprofit that you worked for, they were able to really get the job done and work closely with the people who needed it. So what other differences are there?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start by explaining Spirit of America's model and then giving a case example or two of that. Spirit of America is a privately funded nonprofit. We work directly alongside deployed American troops and diplomats to bring private sector speed, flexibility, and response to our deployed troops and diplomats and the local partners they're working with. So this is essentially, we marry the generosity of American citizens to the national security missions that our deployed troops and diplomats are executing day in and day out, and the local partners and local communities that they're working with. So it's sometimes hard for folks to understand because they what do you mean our troops and diplomats need help? Pentagon has the biggest budget in the world. How do our troops still not have everything they need? And there are these gaps between what government can do and what is actually needed. And I always liken it to, no one expects the Department of Education to handle all things for education in the United States. There's thousands of nonprofits and NGOs that support education. Well, the same is true for national security. And Spirit of America, we are a category of one. We're the only nonprofit that has the authorities to work directly alongside deployed troops. And for the troop to say, like, this is the problem that I'm working on, this is what I'm trying to achieve, and this is why I can't do it. And maybe it's funding, maybe it's because the window of opportunity is small and the U.S. Army can't provide the funding or the assistance until next year, and, the time has come and gone. And that's where Spirit of America steps in with speed and flexibility that only private dollars can do. So it's really exciting to work so closely with, brothers and sisters that are still wearing the uniform and that are deployed, that are, mini ambassadors for the United States. They're representing the flag and the country every single day. And that's where we come in to try to help them out and to close that gap between what actually needs to be done for them to be successful in their mission.
And you started what year did you start at Spirit of America?
2019.
And you are now working, or you were working to support Ukraine. So walk us through that timeline.
Yes. So in 2020 at Spirit of America, I took over the Europe portfolio. So I was the regional director for Europe. So this is during the COVID period, and there was a lot of response related to medical issues at the time. But in 2021, as Russia started to build their troops along the border with Ukraine and Belarus, I was engaging with the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv, with U.S. Special Operations Forces that were deployed to Ukraine since they've been there since 2014, since Russia first invaded Ukraine. And talking with the embassy, talking with troops and saying, what are you guys facing? What are the problems? And remember that Spirit of America, can and should be the first phone call that you make if this is to escalate. And, unfortunately, we know that it did. Russia invaded on February 24th, 2022. And 4 days later, I was on the ground in eastern Poland, where all the American troops and the embassy had been evacuated to, and was working around the clock with the troops and the diplomats there in the chaos and fog of war, and trying to figure out what were the needs. Who were the Ukrainian partners? What did they need? Where were they? How could we get assistance into them? And out of, bottomless needs, how can Spirit of America, with our donor dollars, provide assistance that will be most impactful? So we figured out pretty quickly that, the traditional humanitarian assistance, like winter clothing, food, blankets, there are a lot of NGOs that can cover that. But because of our worldwide memorandum of understanding with the Department of Defense that allows Spirit of America to work directly alongside troops and to provide the assistance that the troops identify as needed, that we found that the most humanitarian thing we could do was to support the armed forces of Ukraine with non-lethal assistance, because all the suffering, everything that was happening was because there were Russian troops attacking Ukraine. So if we can support the armed forces of Ukraine and help them defend their democracy and their sovereignty, then that addresses all the suffering. So Spirit of America, we stay in the non-lethal space. So this was body armor, helmets, meals ready to eat, individual first aid kits, just that rapid assistance that the U.S. government and allies weren't providing at the time. They were providing HIMARS and howitzers and lethal assistance.
The lethal assistance, yeah.
Right. And so we were working with the American troops to fill those gaps and to get the assistance to the frontline Ukrainian troops, many of them who 2 months ago were civilians. They were baristas and IT consultants, and then they volunteered, they joined their military, the Territorial Defense Forces, wearing sweatshirts, truly on the front lines with a rifle and a sweatshirt. And that was it between them and Russian troops invading their home. Really rapid. It was chaotic. It was my cell phone. Somehow anyone who got my number, a Ukrainian doctor in Kryvyi Rih asking for medical supplies, a Ukrainian mother whose son just joined and she was hoping that we could provide him, a helmet and body armor, thousands of WhatsApp messages and signal messages asking for help, working with our U.S. military partners to try to make sure we provided the assistance that was most necessary, that we could provide quickly, and to the locations and the units that needed it most. Really, really intense. I just share as for context, like you get your weekly screen report on your iPhone, for how many hours a day you're on your phone. For those first couple weeks in February and March of 2022, my average was like 22 hours a day.
Wow.
I was on my phone, just working around the clock, coordinating, conflicting, bringing in cargo planes full of assistance into Poland, moving it across the border, getting it to those frontline troops, just nonstop work to help our Ukrainian partners.
Wow. Incredible. That is so incredible. How did you coordinate those planes? I think in our previous conversation, you said there were 4 cargo planes.
Yes.
How did you do that so quickly?
Yeah, so first, it's all because of the generosity of American donors who saw what was happening and understood that Russia invading Ukraine is bigger than just Ukraine. This is an attack on democracy and on sovereignty, and saw the bravery of the Ukrainian defenders. So all of this is possible because of donors, some who donated $10, some who donated 6 or 7 figures. And so because of our memorandum of understanding with Department of Defense, we were able to fly our cargo planes into a Polish military base. Polish Special Operations Forces would unload our planes, put it in their trucks, and all of this coordinated through U.S. Special Operations Forces. They drive their trucks to the border of Ukraine, and Ukrainian Special Operations Forces would meet them at the border. Like we call it no man's land, in between. You get through the Polish customs side and then before the Ukrainian customs side, and transfer all the gear to the Ukrainian Special Operations teams. And then they would move it further into the country. It was going to, frontline places, Mariupol, Kharkiv, Chernihiv, Kyiv, Odessa, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, everywhere. So it's all because of our unique relationship with the U.S. military that gives Spirit of America access, relationships, equipment, right? We didn't have to, the Polish military was using their trucks and moving it to the border. That was $0 for our donors to have to cover. So it's such a great relationship that we're able to work directly alongside and move with the speed and flexibility. It's something I always say again and again because that just doesn't exist, in the government space.
Right.
So it was really, Spirit of America was almost purpose-built for situations like this. American troops saying, my partners need help. I can't provide them with this. Can you help us keep them alive?
Wow.
And so it was really incredible. 4 cargo planes. Still to this day, we're providing assistance, every single day to our Ukrainian partners.
A question about the type of equipment that you're providing. I mean, is this, to me, I would think, okay, you need armor and, helmets. Where do I even go to get those? Is this the sort of equipment you might be providing to other nations and you already had a connect and you were like, I know exactly where to order these, and were they coming from the U.S.?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were able to partner with an American distributor and manufacturer that is headquartered in the Norfolk area. They already had their supply lines and licensing and everything all set up. So we were able to move very quickly with them. That's another thing about Spirit of America. We're pretty lean, because we can work so closely with the U.S. military. We can use the might and the power of the U.S. military, but, in a complementary way, not in a repetitive or redundant way. So, this was all American assistance that we were flying into Poland and then moving across the border into Ukraine. And all of this was coordinated through U.S. military partners. So the Special Forces liaison officer and me were left seat, right seat all day, every day. We're meeting with the U.S. ambassador to Kyiv and the defense attaches, the charge, all up and down the public affairs office, everything to make sure that we're providing the assistance that can have outsized impact. I would like to provide for every need and every single thing, but,
right.
We can't. So we're always trying to focus what are our U.S. military and State Department partners saying is what's most important? What are the anticipated impacts and outcomes? And can we ensure that our donor dollars will achieve this and be the best, investment for those precious dollars?
Absolutely. How long were you in Kyiv? And I know you've gone back and forth, so could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I've been to Ukraine about 40 times, I think, in the last 4 years.
Wow.
It's a beautiful country. I love it. I feel humbled and inspired every single time I'm there. It's easy to forget that everyone anticipated Ukraine would fall within a couple weeks. U.S. intelligence thought that, of course, the Russians thought they could take the country in 3 days. So when I was first in Eastern Poland at the end of February and early March, there was such uncertainty about how long this could last and how what we could do to support. The Battle of Kyiv was won by the Ukrainians at the end of March in 2022, and Russian troops fully withdrew from that attack line end of March and early April of 2022. So I was first in Kyiv, immediately after, driving in and seeing just burned, bombed out buildings, houses, schools, hospitals, like you name it, they attacked it. Like the pavement streets on the highways were all messed up from the Russian tanks that were rolling in and trying to attack from Belarus and enter from the west. Just incredible destruction, like tanks just burned out on the side of the roads, ambulances, gas stations that the Russian soldiers looted and shot up. And, so spent a lot of time in Kyiv and throughout the country, moving our assistance and meeting local partners, being on the ground to understand, what the needs were and who we could implement the programs with. So made a lot of, incredible relationships, partners, friends throughout the Ukrainian military, throughout Ukrainian civil society, throughout their NGO community, and of course, all the other international NGOs that are in Ukraine as well.
You mentioned in our pre-chat this whole society resistance, and I would love for you to sort of explain that concept because, again, I think Americans, and how amazing that I know so many Americans have supported Ukraine in this conflict, whether it's just flying the Ukrainian flag outside their house. I still see them in my neighborhood, but to donations that have allowed you to do the work that you do. But I think for most of us, it's just a news story. It's not like I don't know of anyone outside of you who's been there on the ground to really see what you call this whole of society resistance. So I think, if you could talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Russia invaded Ukraine first in 2014 in Crimea and then in Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Ukraine has been at war and defending their country for 8 years by the time Russia launched their full-scale invasion in 2022. So during those 8 years and even beforehand, Ukrainian civil society really mobilized, and the NGO world is very healthy there. Ukrainians just naturally have a entrepreneurial spirit. They are problem solvers, and so much of this is because of their history and what they and their families and forefathers and foremothers had to grow up with in the Soviet period and even beforehand. So it's really in like the Ukrainian DNA, much like American DNA, to solve problems, to take responsibility and matters into your own hand and to build your own networks. So Ukrainian civil society, whether it be in the defense space or education space or health space, was pretty vibrant and pretty healthy, especially by like a Eastern European standard, just leaps and bounds ahead of any other countries I've worked in Europe or Eastern Europe. So with the full-scale invasion, this really is like an existential battle. This is their survival. It really is that black and white. One pilot that I met, a Ukrainian pilot, he told me, he was like, what other choice do I have? I either fight or I am killed in action or my children live as slaves. It really is that stark to them. So it is a whole of society approach, whether you're in the military or you are a civilian or a volunteer. Every Ukrainian I know donates monthly to different charities and different organizations or is doing what they can to advocate for support to Ukraine or spending their weekend painting the bomb shelter at their children's school so that, when the air raid alert goes off, the kids can go down and still have a somewhat secure, comfortable space, during the air raids. So it really is this whole of society effort that is incredibly inspiring. It's, I've never seen anything like it. And I think there's so many lessons learned, too, there of like, you don't have to wear a uniform to serve your nation. Service can take many shapes, many forms. And I think that's inspiring. That's beautiful, right? And I see that a lot in American society, too, that like volunteerism is in our DNA. And that's pretty unique. I think we take it for granted. But it's one of the best things about this country and certainly about Ukraine.
Wow. You are so cool. You are so cool. That is awesome. So you have done so much for Ukraine, and I know you received the Order of Merit from Ukraine. Can you talk a little bit about what that meant to you? Because even just watching you right now, you light up when you're talking about this, and you can tell that from the bottom of your heart, you love Ukraine, you love the people that you have served, and I think that would just be such an honor. So can you tell us a little bit about what that meant to you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm very lucky at being the regional director for Europe for Spirit of America. I was on the ground so much and leading our Europe team and our programming. So I humbly received a lot of attention or accolades that can be attributed to a lot of people, not just myself. But this was through the Ministry of Defense, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense recognized Spirit of America, recognized me and my team for the non-lethal assistance that we provided, and especially to particular units that really helped defend cities and make sure they weren't taken under Russian control. Kyiv and Mykolaiv in particular. So we were given this award in the summer of 2023. And again, our projects are impactful because of our relationship with the U.S. military and therefore the access to information, unique needs that are identified to us that we can help solve. So it's really a combination of all of that, which led to some of these acknowledgments and very generous appreciation. One thing I always ask Ukrainian partners and friends when I'm leaving and preparing to return to the United States, I always ask them, like, what message do you want me to carry back to the United States, from a Ukrainian to an American audience? And it's always thank you. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you. We can't do this without you. And also, please, continue to remember us. Please continue to support us. We believe in democracy and freedom just like you guys do. Help us keep it here. So it's been a wonderful, humbling, it feels silly to call it wonderful because it's war, right? It is. It's horrible what's happening. But it has, opened my eyes to so much and to such brave, resilient people. And, I just almost laughed to myself about how I came from Buffalo, New York, how I went to the Coast Guard Academy. I served on ships and then, I'm in a war zone a couple of years later.
Wow.
It's quite a ride.
Do you feel like your Coast Guard Foundation really prepared you for that moment?
Absolutely. It's a good question because I think about this a lot. When you're in the Coast Guard and especially on a ship, if something goes wrong, if a generator fails or your engine's having trouble, you have to fix it. You have to work the problem and you have to figure it out. There's no other option. Yeah. And I think that attitude and that experience is really so important to carry into my current job and other disaster relief and humanitarian work to diagnose, to stay calm, to diagnose, to figure it out, and to come up with a couple solutions. And so that's something working that problem is, certainly a lesson experienced many times in the Coast Guard because things can and do go wrong, and staying cool and figuring out, what's next. So I certainly think that has helped over the years, and especially in some pretty hairy situations.
Definitely. That is awesome. I think a common theme that I'm hearing throughout every story, whether it was when you were an Admiral's Aide, when you were on a ship, Spirit of America, all things like that, you're dealing with very heavy topics. You're dealing with a lot of difficult conversations, a lot of scary situations. So what would you say to your 21-year-old self that you think is important to carry with you throughout your career as it relates to mental health and taking care of yourself?
Yeah. I think I would first say, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of others. And there was, certainly for a long part of my career that I didn't do that, right? That I felt selfish, taking time to think of myself or take care of myself. And, I've come to realize that is the most unhealthy backwards approach ever, right? You have to take care of yourself. You have to acknowledge when you're facing something difficult or going through something difficult and be able to talk through it and to have friends, a therapist, a community to be able to work it out. And it's okay. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. And I know that you have founded a club here at the Academy to focus on mental health. I think that's so cool. I'd love to hear more about it, 'cause that's so important.
Yes, the club is called CALM. It stands for Cadet Advocates for Living Mindfully, and it's exactly what you just said. It really talks about the importance of you have to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. You know, to be a leader, you really need to make sure that you're doing okay so you can give yourself to others, and the importance and, you know, breaking down that stigma that it's okay to get help. It's okay to talk about, you know, so-called weaknesses, and it's okay to feel like you're not doing okay. And it's okay to really address that. So I think it is so cool that you have, like you said, you literally have been to a war zone. And I love that you're advocating about therapy and you're advocating about taking care of yourself, and you're still going to get the job done. The Ukrainians still received the aid and the help that they needed, and you were able to be okay because you were taking the time for yourself. And also, the 22-hour screen time is crazy.
At what point do you say, oh, hey, I got to take a nap?
Yeah.
What does that delegation look like? Because I would imagine you weren't there alone.
Yeah.
And knowing when to say, okay, I can't take this anymore. I'm going to pass it off to someone else for now. Like, I think people have to feel comfortable with delegation too, which I think is a huge part of leadership. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that, because
Definitely.
that I think can be hard for people.
Yeah, it's really hard. You know, I'm not a micromanager in any way. If you feel so passionately about something, it's hard to put it down, you know,
Right.
or to, you know, hand the baton. But I have had and have a great team at Spirit of America, great program managers and great partners, you know, throughout the world. Yeah, having the ability to like take a time out on yourself and say, like, why am I okay to still be doing this? Like, am I the best person to be doing this? Yeah, do I need to take a couple hours and get a nap and a shower and a meal? You know, so there's always that like chaotic schedule, but I think you can always take 5 minutes to do some deep breaths and to check in on yourself. And just as importantly, check in on your team and make sure that they're doing okay too. One thing Admiral Ray told me, and it always stuck with me, was he said, you know, if someone emails you or shoots you a message and says like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? Like, you always say yes. You don't know what that 5 minutes could lead to. And even if it's, you know, it's 4 a.m. Ukraine time, but it's 9 p.m. East Coast time, you know, you say yes, because not only does that show your team member that like you're there for them, and that you're reliable and they can count on you, but it can also be, you know, 5 minutes can make a big difference for yourself and for others. So that's something that I definitely, you know, remind myself like daily of, like, take those 5 minutes for yourself, take the 5 minutes for your team. You know, whenever they ask for it, or even if they don't, like, then you reach out and ask them, hey, you got 5 minutes? Like, let's check in real quick.
I love that. Yeah, it's definitely not selfish to take that time for yourself. And it allows you to even better show up for those other ones and for that other 5 minutes. So thank you for that so much. I love that.
That's so cool that you've founded CALM.
Thank you.
It's part of the fabric here at the Academy, because it's a really important.
Definitely. I have seen a huge increase in a want and a need to have these discussions and these conversations. And we have had, I mean, it's only been around for 2 years, and we have over 400 members in the club, which is bigger than some of the other clubs that have been around for decades here at the Academy. So yes. And every month at the lunch excusals, there's over 100 people usually who show up. So it is a big topic of conversations. People want to hear it. And I think your story is so incredible, exemplifying the importance of that and exemplifying that you are still amazing and strong and incredible, and you're still able to get everything done because you're taking those 5 minutes to regroup and figure out, you know, what do I need right now? How am I feeling? And then how can I help others? I think that's awesome.
Aislinn, I have a question for you, because you are going to be leaving the Academy soon. You're graduating. How do you hope to bring CALM with you to your units and to the fleet? Because, you know, I think you recognized a gap here, but have you thought through like what this might look like? Because, you know, you're going to want to continue that sort of feeling of community.
Definitely. I mean, similar to you with this whole humanitarian theme, it's become a passion. And I think talking about mental health and the importance of education and the importance of openly discussing the stigmas around it, that has become a passion of mine the last few years. And so I think the biggest thing is really, acting about what I'm saying. So I think it's important for people to see leaders, someone in uniform, talking about the importance of taking care of themselves and talking about the importance of it's okay if you take those 5 minutes. And so I plan on doing that at Base Cleveland.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I plan on bringing that forward and really practicing what I preach and having those open discussions with people. And I'm also a big people person. I love talking to people, getting to know them. I think it's so important to actually understand, even in the cadet life, like understanding my division, what's going on in their lives, what do they need? And I think what I've learned in the last 2 years from being a second class and a firstie within my division is I've been able to understand when someone's really not doing okay, even if they're not saying it. And it's truly from just saying, how are you? And actually meaning it and actually listening to their response. And that has been so incredible for me to learn that, in general, I've loved talking to people, but when you're able to understand when someone needs help, you can kind of like you kept saying.
Fast and flexible.
Yes, fast and flexible. I think exactly like you were saying, being fast and flexible and understanding that this person is not themselves right now and we need to be fast and flexible to get them help. And because of that, in those situations at the academy, I've been able to see that those people have gotten help. So I plan on carrying that with me throughout my career in the Coast Guard and beyond. I think just practicing what you preach and looking up to people like you, having mentors like you, I think is really awesome to see people really acting it out.
Yeah. Well, I think like the best leaders are not just book smart, but they have that emotional intelligence and are able to, they prioritize getting to know their people so that they can identify if something maybe isn't going so well or if someone is really doing well. Right?
Exactly.
And so I think that's great that you're going to take it to Cleveland and elsewhere. That's really great. And that leadership it's going to go really far, right? This isn't just a up or down thing. This is a lateral thing as well. It affects everyone. The civilians, your junior enlisted, your senior enlisted, the senior officer corps, right? This is totally comprehensive. Yeah,
absolutely.
Affects everyone. That's great, Aislinn.
Thank you. All right. So let's jump into the lightning round. What is one academy lesson that still guides you today?
Yeah. It goes back to like 5 or 10 minutes again. The Commandant of Cadets at the time, Captain Wisniewski, he would tell us, take advantage of those 5 or 10 minute windows, buff your decks, or, do one more chemistry problem, because those 5 or 10 minute windows, will add up throughout the day, and you'll be surprised by how much you can actually get done. And, as a cadet, the days never felt long enough. Reveille to taps, just there was never enough time, right? So I thought that was great advice that I took to heart as a cadet and still try to do, use those 5 minutes to get something done or to check something off the list or to check in on someone,
I love that. All right. One leadership habit you never skip.
There was the Special Forces commander who once gave the speech, when you wake up, make your bed. Start your day by making your bed. I can't say I don't always. I'm 95% on that. I think just, starting the day with intention, right? And it starts as simple as making that bed, because that's the first thing. Am I going to do it or am I not? Am I going to accomplish this or am I going to brush it off? So I really enjoy that. Make your bed.
Right. Love that. Completing one task at the start. That's amazing. Alrighty. Advice to cadets who want to serve in humanitarian spaces.
First, I'd say, that's awesome. Come join. I would say talk to folks. Use your network to expand out to find those that do work in the humanitarian space. It's so valuable. A 30-minute conversation can inform you so much on if that is something you want to do or maybe it's not what you thought it was. And so I would say have those conversations, right? There's only so much you can learn from, Googling things or, reading fact sheets or whatever, but talking in person with someone and making sure that is something that, you're right for and is right for you. Use your network. Don't be afraid to ask.
Love that. And what gives you hope right now?
I'd say meeting you and cadets like you, hearing what you've accomplished with establishing a club here, a really popular club, and looking forward to having a full career ahead of you. It's really It's really inspiring. I think the long blue line, it's more than just a phrase. So I'd say you and your team and like seeing the Corps and its health today is really inspiring.
Thank you. And for our final question, what does save lives mean to you today?
I see it in, of course it's practical, right? There's a practical sense to it, but also I think there's a level of respecting human dignity that comes with, like, that I see in the term of saving lives, respecting someone's right to exist, their right to human dignity, their right to have choice in who they are, where they are, the life they want to lead. I think that's really, save lives is a lot more than just the literal sense of having a pulse.
I love that. Thank you so much, Colleen. It was incredible to meet you and to hear your story. And I have really taken so many life lessons and leadership lessons that I am going to carry forward with me throughout the Coast Guard and beyond. So thank you very much. You are incredible. And it is so cool to see an alum be so successful, not only in the Coast Guard, but beyond. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for this podcast, and go Bears.
Go Bears.
That was our conversation for today. Thank you for joining us here in Studio 1887. Stick around for a few more minutes as I spotlight what your impact looks like in action here at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. In a short closing segment, we're calling the Alumni Impact Interlude. Financial support from the Alumni Association is a game changer for the overall cadet experience. Learn more from the following cadet who is directly benefiting from your support. It's time for the Alumni Impact Interlude, and today's topic is the Cadet Cyber Team. The Cyber Team is a group of cadets who challenge themselves beyond their major specific coursework by spending time outside of class honing their technical cybersecurity abilities. Team members compete in regional and international competitions, and the Alumni Association has supported the team by covering travel costs for those same competitions, facilitating access to software training like OffSec's Cyber Core, and more. The team excelled last fall at the National Cyber League competition, placing second out of more than 4,000 teams, with 6 cadets finishing in the top 10% individually. Notably, second class Max Eisenbeiser, who joins me today, finished third overall among 7,821 competitors. Oh my gosh, Max. That's awesome. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with, what do you love most about being a part of the cyber team?
The thing I love most is honestly just the team. We've got a great group of, highly talented, driven individuals, and as my cadre, former captain Connor Fulbright said, you'll never find a group of people like that. People who are driven, who are so uniquely unified under one goal of being technically competent, and skilled. And it's just a pleasure to be around them in the team room, and they're my closest friends.
Now, you've been on the team since you were 4th class?
Yeah, absolutely, yes, ma'am.
Talk me through the experience of attending the national competition and then what it felt like when you guys knew you were second.
It was nerve-wracking for sure. And it's funny because that particular competition, NCL or National Cyber League, it's an online competition. So just like any other competition, we're in the cyber team room, just the same place we are every day for practice, our home turf advantage, I guess. But the energy is entirely different when it's coming down to the wire, and the nerves you feel. The way that competition works is there's accuracy points, and so if you get one question wrong, a wrong submission, an incorrect guess, that counts against you. So it's like defusing a bomb.
Yeah.
Really. But the energy is incredible, and when we found out that we came in second, which was later at the award ceremony, that's probably one of the best feelings I felt being on the team.
That's so cool. Now, how long is this competition? Like, how long are you, in the cyber room, answering the questions and feeling stressed out? Like, what's that time frame?
It is a marathon. It is a 72-hour competition about.
Whoa!
So it starts Friday evening, sometimes while we're in classes.
Wow.
And then it continues all the way until Sunday night. It's unlike any other, I think, competition where there's no downtime that whole weekend, and you're constantly, you eat, breathe, sleep the competition. You're thinking about it as you go to bed, waking up. First thing you do is see, did that idea work? It's really intense.
Wow. So give me an example of a question that you might have gotten during the competition for for those who don't know anything about cyber competitions? Like, what is that exactly?
The easiest one to explain is there's a series of 3, they call them web challenges. So there's different categories for the competition, and web challenges are my specialty. Basically, they give you a website with sometimes as little as just, figure out how to hack this website, how to break into it, find the vulnerability, and use that to get what they call the flag. The flag is it's a string of text that just signifies that once you know that string that's hidden somewhere in the code, that you've completed the competition. It's basically a proof of work.
Okay.
And so, we had several of these competitions where, I'd be spending hours just testing every single little parameter line of code in this website until I found that vulnerability. And, working on it for several hours in a row, it really makes the payoff, feel great.
I bet. So can you talk me through how alumni support has helped the team excel?
Oh, the Alumni Association has been critical to our success. I think a lot of the competitions that we go to, especially when we're traveling in person, those definitely wouldn't happen without the Alumni Association. And so we really appreciate all the support that we feel from the Alumni Association. They're really great. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without them.
Awesome. So I want to talk, before we wrap it up, you guys are the defending champions of the Net Wars Academy Cup. How are you feeling going into this year's competition?
It's a new perspective for sure. So our travel authorization actually just got approved, and we're scrambling last minute to try and get our, all of our signatures, get permission to leave class. And we're going into it with a different perspective. This is the first time. Last year was the first time we ever won, and this year, we're not just the underdogs anymore. We're the defending champs.
Yeah, so everyone's going to be coming at you.
Exactly. We're the ones to beat for the first time ever, and so definitely a lot more nerves being in that different position, something we've never done before. But I know that me and the team, we're going to step up to the challenge, and I'm really excited for it.
How many of you guys are going down?
5 and a coach, and it's going to be really exciting.
Max, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciated you sharing, your cyber team journey, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you to our alumni community for your continued engagement. You are what keep this community strong and thriving, especially our members. Membership in your alumni association matters. It empowers connections between our alumni and the Academy to develop thriving and enduring relationships. It supports state-of-the-art and margin of excellence enhancements for the Corps of Cadets. And membership also comes with some pretty cool benefits, like access to professional development and certifications, unique connection opportunities to grow your network, discounts and savings when welcoming back the whole family for homecoming, and so much more. Your membership even supports projects like this podcast. So stay connected, stay up to date, and ensure that your ties to the Long Blue Line remain strong. Become a member today at cgaalumni.org/1887. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, rate, and share with your network so these stories can continue to reach and connect our community. Until next time.